Good freezing morning, everyone. You can please some of the people some of the time, but you cannot please all the people all the time. We've heard this hackneyed idiom very often in our lives, I'm sure. And as trite as it is very true. If we are governed by other people's expectations and opinions of us and their desires for what we should do and how we should live, then we will be pulled this way and that. Over and over again, we will have that experience in life, and we will discover continually that there is no way that we'll be able to please all the people all the time. I've certainly learned that in parish ministry and got to the point where I was very happy if I was able to please some of the people. Always we will fall short. And even if we manage to make some people happy, sometimes there is the danger that they will get tired of us. Anyway, for some people, nothing ever is quite good enough. They continually notice people who are younger, people they consider more dynamic, people who are better looking, people who make more noise, and people they think offer more potential. In the scriptures, we have a similar idiom with respect to John the Baptist and Jesus. The people expected to play the music and have John firstly and then Jesus dance to their music. And Jesus pointed out how they would never be satisfied. John, people might have said, was too radical, too wild, too extreme, too stern, too demanding, and inclined towards the ascetic. And he had this peculiar diet of locusts and wild honey, and he similarly dressed in peculiar fashion. He just didn't fit in. And so people complained about John that he was so different and so extreme. And then along came Jesus, and Jesus appeared by contrast to be a lot freer and easier in terms of eating and drinking and fraternizing with undesirable groups of people. And so then the criticism was that Jesus was not holding himself aloof, that he was engaging too much with the common people and with undesirable people at that. And so the people said that they could not get John or Jesus to dance to their music. I guess one could say that they were always changing their music anyway, and so it was very difficult. John the Baptist and Jesus were just not good enough. They didn't fulfill the expectations of the people. In the first book of Samuel, chapter 8, the people say to Samuel, who is a prophet and judge, who had ruled over them for probably at least 20 years by this stage, they say to Samuel, "You are old, and your sons do not follow in your ways. Appoint for us then a king to govern us like other nations." This is hardly tactful and diplomatic and sensitive. Essentially, they're saying, you're past your prime, and none of your sons is a suitable replacement. And besides this, anyway, we want a king like the other peoples around us. We want a king rather than a prophet or a judge to rule over us. Samuel warned the people that a king would take their sons and appoint them to his chariots and appoint them to be his horsemen, and he would make them run before his chariots. A king, Samuel said, would appoint commanders and make his subjects plough his ground and reap his harvest and make his implements of war and the equipment of his chariots. A king would take their daughters to be perfumers and cooks and bakers. He would take the best of their fields and vineyards and olive orchards and give them to his courtiers. He would take 1/10 of their grain and of their vineyards as well, and he would take that also for his courtiers. He would take 1/10 of their flocks, and he would take their male and female slaves, and he would take the best of their cattle and donkeys and use them for his work. He would make their slaves his own slaves. Samuel laid it on really thick, trying to convince them that a king was a bad idea. He would oppress them and exploit them, and one can't help but feel that Samuel was rather peeved at being told that he was old and that the people were ready to dispense with him after he had given them years of faithful and sacrificial service. But the people were adamant. We are determined to have a king over us just like other nations. We are determined to have a king to govern us and to go out before us and to fight our battles. At this point, Samuel really needed to bow out gracefully. And in his position, if he was really gracious, he would have bowed out and then prayed that their having a king would turn out to be successful and would turn out to be a blessing to the nation of Israel. And if you're a little bit mean, you would be forced to bow out, and you would silently probably hope that having a king would prove to be an absolute disaster, so that the people rued the day that they insisted on having a king, as opposed to a prophet/judge. In Mark chapter 3, we read about Jesus' family coming to him to restrain him because he was so busy ministering to the crowds of people that he wasn't paying proper attention to his physical need for regular meals and for proper rest. People were saying about Jesus, he has gone out of his mind. And to give Jesus' family the benefit of the doubt, they were legitimately concerned about his welfare. They were motivated by concern and compassion, but in a sense they were trying to control Jesus. Jesus' response when he was told that his mother and his brothers and sisters had arrived and were asking to see him seems a bit harsh. Who are my mother and my brothers? Whoever does the will of God is my brother and sister and mother. Clearly, Jesus was not going to be ruled by his family's expectations. And on another occasion, it is very clear that Jesus did not set store by the people's enthusiastic response to his ministry, because he knew that that enthusiasm could change very easily into criticism and antagonism and disillusionment. In Mark chapter 3, the same chapter, which is the gospel passage set for today, we read about the scribes from Jerusalem who say that Jesus is using the power of the devil to cast out demons. And Jesus has to then point out that this is a stupid, illogical argument, because the last thing that the devil would want to do is to set people free from the power of demons. But the scribes and the Pharisees would use any kind of argument to attack Jesus, because they were made uncomfortable by his success in ministry, by the way in which he ministered, he taught, and there was power and authority in his words, and there were dramatic signs that took place. The sick were healed, and demons were cast out of the possessed people. And so the success of the ministry of Jesus and his dynamism, his charismatic nature and ability to speak with such confidence and such power, that emphasized the impotence of the teaching of the scribes and the Pharisees. And so Jesus was experienced as a threat, and they wanted Jesus out of the way so that things could return to how they were before the arrival of Jesus, who upset the apple cart. If people have made up their minds, then it is extremely difficult to get them to change their thinking. If we are convinced about something or someone, we are not easily persuaded to believe differently. But conversely, if the tide of opinion changes, if some other thought or idea or argument becomes fashionable, then people will change their allegiance very easily to mirror what is popular at the time. But prejudice is really deep. It's so deep-rooted, it is so deep inside of us that we might not be liberated from that which we have held on to for decades, and our words and our behavior might just be an outward show. A lot of us are older, and perhaps we have learned not to be obsessed with other people's expectations. But we have to choose between trying to be open-minded and flexible and ready to change in our thinking and ready to acknowledge our prejudice, which is deep-seated and deeply rooted. We have to be ready to see that we have some hardened attitudes. That is the one choice. And the other choice of responding is to become increasingly dogmatic and stubborn, and to refuse to yield and refuse to be liberated from fixed ideas and patterns of thinking that don't allow the Spirit to change us. Paul says in Romans chapter 12 that we should be transformed by the renewal of our minds. And in today's New Testament reading, it's not really talking about the same kind of thing, renewal and change and being flexible and open to the Spirit and ready to give way to the challenges of the Spirit and to begin to think differently. Nevertheless, in today's New Testament lesson, I think, but in Romans 12 anyway, Paul says that we should be transformed by the renewal of our minds. Actually, now in today's New Testament reading, a different reading, Paul says our inner nature is being renewed day by day, even though outwardly we are decaying. That's the comforting thing. We cannot prevent ourselves from succumbing to the outward marks of aging. But we can be determined to be open to challenge and to change, trying to understand what we don't understand, to see what we don't see that is in us. We can make up our minds to be ready to listen and to think, and to be prepared to see in ourselves what is inappropriate, what keeps us captive to the old, unrenewed self. And so today, really a reminder that we should not live our lives in an attempt to fulfill the expectations of others. We should know ourselves, and we should be able to see our deep-seated and deeply rooted prejudices and our hardened attitudes. We should be searching ourselves very thoroughly, which really is what prayer is all about and what confession in particular is all about, trying to know who we are at the core of our beings, what makes us tick, and what there is in us that is a vestige of the old, unrenewed nature. And to be making a continual recommitment to becoming new. And continuing commitment also to being who we truly are, so that we are not trying to dance to other people's music. But that does not mean that we should be ungracious and inflexible and dogmatic, because there's this process of looking at ourselves carefully and deeply and allowing the Spirit to change us as we cooperate with the Spirit, because we recognize that it is not life-giving to hold on to some of the unredeemed stuff that is in us. Breathe on me, breath of God. Fill me with life anew, so that I love the things you love and do the things you do. Breathe on me, breath of God, until my heart is pure, until with you I will to do and to endure. Breathe on me, breath of God, till I'm completely yours, until the earthly part of me glows with your fire divine. Breathe on me, breath of God, so that I never die, but live with you the perfect life of your eternity. Amen. And God bless.